Okay, my name is Joe Graziosi, Joseph, of course, the full name, and I'm from the Massachusetts area originally, and here I am. I came out here to Southern California to work with some directors of one of the community church groups closer to Los Angeles, Long Beach community, and I did some workshops up there, and I also taught a workshop in a place called Keep in Los Angeles, and at the Folk Dance Center here in San Diego. And then I return tonight. I come back later in the month to do more workshops. This is basically what I've been doing since 82, 83.
And you lived in Japan for a while?
No, I never lived in Japan. I've been to Japan 12 times teaching Greek dance.
Okay.
Yes.
That seems so unusual to me. To have
It
Greek
seems
dance in Japan.
unusual to almost everyone I mention it to.
How did that get started there?
It's part of their international folk dance clubs that they have in groups that, the way I understand it, international folk dancing was introduced in Japan by the government after World War II as a means of sort of like sort of opening the minds of the Japanese to other cultures and other peoples. They were somewhat xenophobic in those days, and the government wanted to, make them more accepting of other peoples and cultures. So.
Right. Greek
I grew up dancing Greek dancing, not in a performing group. I grew up social Greek dancing, at church functions and summer picnics and things like that. There were no real formal performing groups when I was youngster. And I just happened of the four siblings, I'm the one who fell in love with Greek music and dance. So.
And that happened in college, after college?
No, that happened
Or
much
when you were
earlier.
younger? Okay.
Much younger, yes. That happened in the environment of my relatives and in the church community and whatnot, yes.
So you always knew that you wanted to be involved?
I always knew I liked it. I didn't know I was going to be so involved. The involvement as far as teaching and teaching professionally came later. Came after college. It came a few years after I moved down to New York City. And it kind of fell into it, and I thought, let me give this a chance. There's actually a market out there for this, and I enjoy it. I love what I'm doing, and so it took off from there. I did start international folk dancing in New York City in their folk dance clubs, and very early on, with a native Greek American New Yorker, we organized a group called the Greek American Folklore Society, which was a performing group, and I worked with them through the decade of the 80s. They're still in existence. They're still one of the major performing groups in New York.
Yeah.
I got involved in FDF through Don and Ellie Hyatt.
All right.
I had already been out to California a few times teaching Greek dance for folk dance groups, and I heard about FDF, and in the meantime, I had met like Aunt Sorota and Charlie Kiriakou, who were involved with FDF at the time, and they and Don and Ellie suggested me to be one of the judges, and I came out and I was a judge, and that same year afterwards I was contacted by a few groups and asked if I would be willing to do workshops with them, including Stained Spiridons here in San Diego, which was one of the very first Greek community groups I worked with in California in the early mid-80s, I guess.
And who were some of the people at St. Spiridon then that you...
Marilyn Yates, Christine and Maria Trompis, George Fajuris, Sandy Muzas, who else? Well, my brain. It's been the majority of years since 1985.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the majority of years.
Just wasn't last year.
Yeah, there were a few times I didn't make it because, well, at least twice I went to Japan. It overlapped with a tour to Japan, and and then or something else might have come up and I couldn't make it. But for the most part, yes. I much prefer teaching over judging.
Okay.
Not just adults, but youth too, the groups themselves. But I think the judging also complements the teaching because it sort of directs the dancers into a certain approach to Greek dance. You know, when I first came to FDF, the performing groups were dancing predominantly what I call sort of Greek American taverna style dances, which were sort of like, you know, the Las Vegas, the NBC Rockettes version of Greek dancing.
Right.
High choreography, straight lines that, you know, opened and closed and crisscrossed, and big steps and big movements, you know, and loud music, and we consciously try to steer them into a direction of more quote unquote, I don't know if I like this word, authentic village regional style dancing, which we've been quite successful because that's almost all what you see now at FDF.
Why did you put authentic in quotes?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what we mean by that. We mean by dance traditions that reflected what the reality on the ground in the villages in the certain regions. Of course, that reality has been changing rapidly itself. We want to get away from this, you know, this, I guess, Hollywood approach to Greek dance. I shouldn't say that down here, I guess, maybe, but you know it. Folk dance in general, I think when I first came to FDF, what was happening among Greek American youth, the young generation at the time, is that it had been pretty much homogenized, Greek dancing. There was certain styling that was very American. And now that's happening in Greece too. There's a tendency, and that's because of the way they teach, I think. That's because of just modern life. Everyone's more in communication with each other. And it's easier to put something in a mold, a straitjacket, and teach it that way, you know, set this, set that. I've been trying to resist that, and, you know, because my objective is not to teach dances, but teach the kids dancing, you know, how to actually really dance with their body, how to feel the music, you know, to get them to that stage where, you know, it's something they really want to do and something they can do without thinking about it too much.
Right. That's what I read, that you want kids to dance with conviction.
With conviction, exactly. With ease of conviction, natural movement, and with a real sense of they're enjoying what they're doing. Not with, you know, fake smiles plastered on their face like, you know, you might see from Moiseev ballet.
Right.
Part of the problem, I think, is that, you know, we all live in different areas. I mean, Mary and I live quite far from each other. We're all we're East Coasters, and so many other judges are West Coasters. And I think the objectives of the actual powers that be at FDF are different from the objectives that I, as a teacher and a judge, have. You know, because I think their ultimate objective is whatever is good for the church, and their ultimate objective is to keep the youth in the church and to keep them active in the church.
And yours is?
My union is basically
dancing.
to keep these dances alive and have the kids fall in love with this dancing and music, and to perpetuate it and keep it going.
Are those two opposed to each other?
No, they're
Those
not.
two ideas?
They're not. But
Yeah, I understand
You know,
what you're saying, though. Do
right.
they still have workshops in the parishes?
in the parishes, but they're independent. It's the FDF itself doesn't sponsor workshops anymore, which it did in the old days.
Oh.
But the individual parishes will set up workshops and hire different teachers, including me and others, to come and teach dancing. There was talk about, you know, why don't we do workshops on the weekend? It's just totally impossible. I mean, we're talking there are 90 to 100 groups through the weekend, and there's no time to breathe, never mind to do a workshop. So there would be weekend things, usually sometimes in the summer, sometimes in the fall. Different churches would sponsor, would be host community, and they usually would invite, you know, 2 to 3 to 4 teachers to come and show different dances from different regions, and maybe there would be an open panel discussing, you know, the merit, what good points of staging a dance, what you know, things like that. Mary Chorus was always wonderful for that. That was her strength, is staging dancing without making it look choreographed.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, each of the judges, we don't all have the same criteria. I mean, we have generally the same criteria, but as individuals, we have different things that we like to see. And that's one of my pet peeves. You know, I don't want to see a group of kids up there who, in their face, you can tell they're like counting steps in their face, in their mind. You want them not to be on that. You want them to be above that kind of level. So, yeah.
Level to the next, but
The first 15 years of me being at FDF, the level of improvement was incredible. And it's still, you can still see improvement. Certain groups are just amazing. There's, I don't know if I should, what I've noticed in the last several years is a little bit of a complacency among, I think, some of the newer, younger directors who basically had things handed to them. As dancers growing up, they didn't,
Sure.
so the concept of research or looking is new, and, and things are, they'll go on YouTube to look at dances and whatnot, but they'll go on YouTube without knowing how to critique what they're looking at, with a good critical eye or something like that.
that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Go ahead.
And that's one of the things I would like if there was a FDF workshop, was to not teach specific dances, but to give pointers of how to research and what you're looking for, and how can you distinguish good dancing from not so good dancing, we can say. Or how can you distinguish something that is authentic from something that looks like somebody made it up, after a bad meal at night,
I hope it doesn't look.
Yeah.
So I know, I've heard that kids are learning Greek dance from YouTube videos.
Yeah, I can understand why. It's
Sure.
click, 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 and it's there. Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like you could get that same feeling.
You can't. Dance is three-dimensional movement. It's tactile and everything else. You need, I think, to learn in an environment when other people are dancing next to you and you're in a group and whatnot. And I've seen many, many times where somebody tries to learn off of YouTube and they've misinterpreted what they're seeing, or misinterpreted the rhythm or the music. They don't hear it with a trained ear or whatnot.
Right, I can understand that.
So that's one thing I wanted to. If I write anything in general post FDF sometime, it'll be, how to work with YouTube and my tube and his tube and everyone else's
Yeah.
tubes.
This was the first time I had read that Greek dances aren't always named after places. They could be named after people. And
They could be named after
costumes.
people. They could be named after a group of people. They could be named just the name of the accompanying song. Could be the name of the dance itself.
Why would a dance be named after clothing? It said, yeah.
Oh, well, no. Okay, for example, there's a dance term you'll find up north in Thrace,
The
zonoradiko.
names of clothing worn during the dance.
Right. So zonoradiko is from the word zonari, meaning it was the old-fashioned sashes the men wore in the old days. And they called it zonoradiko because that's how they held each other. They would grab onto the sash of the man next to them, or the woman, and they would dance in that kind of handhold, so the dance was called zonoradikos.
Okay. Can you think of a dance that's named after an individual?
Oh, several. It depends. Like, for example, in the area west of Thessaloniki, area called Rumluki, there are many dances that have, there's, Maria's dance, or Dimitra's dance, or Gyulu's dance, or, Tis Marias, these Dimitroulas. Very common up there. Whether those dancers, why they were named that, it could be because the dance might have pre-existed, and someone named Dimitra 100 years ago that was her favorite dance, and she was a wonderful dancer, so people started calling it Dimitra's dance.
Okay.
And there's many reasons, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everything has to be looked at as if has its own history.
That's religions today? Or
I think in the old days they mirrored more or less, I think, the way of life people had. And I think that's one of the reasons why dance styling has changed so radically, especially even in Greece among younger generations. They don't live the same way. Their body types aren't the same. Their life is a lot easier for them. They're not as physical. They don't have these people. Their whole life was based on some kind of physical labor. And the dancing reflected that.
right. So they.
And it was amazing. You see these old-time villagers, especially farmers, villagers, shepherds, even at a very old age, and even when they're like put on the pounds, the control they have, the way of centering the body weight is just so on it. It's just so amazing.
And that's because they've been using their bodies their whole lives.
Right.
They
They
never-
know they're so comfortable with their bodies, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think young urban kids are in general. So the quality of the dancing here in FDF in general was higher. I would say more advanced, more sophisticated than in HDF. That is changing rapidly. FDF groups are making up for lost time very quickly, which is very, very nice. It's not as big. It's not as overwhelming. It's a little bit more laid back. People's attitudes are more laid back too, which is nice, because the FDF can be a very intense weekend, very intense
Yeah,
weekend.
no kidding.
It also reflects. This is sort of different. When I first came out to California and saw the Greek performing groups, my impression was that, at least for the generation that I grew up, East Coasters were much better dancers than West Coasters. The style of dancing looked more Greek, the way they just moved. That's no longer the case. Because of FDF, the young kids here in California and the West Coast in general, their dancing really looks Greek. And the young kids now in the East Coast, and I'm thinking, when I say East Coast, I mean, what I'm familiar with is the Northeast, third, fourth generation, their dancing is fast, poorer. The quality of their movement, they look like American-born kids of 3, 4 generations.
So
Which is not a bad thing, I guess, but it's not what I love to see. It's not what I fell in love with Greek dancing because I had visions in my head. I saw, not visions. I remembered my parents' generation and grandparents' generation, how they danced. And I loved it, more than anything else. Yeah.
And it's hard to preserve that.
It is hard to preserve. It's, and young kids get into dance for different reasons. Some love it. Some do it because it's someplace to meet other kids. A lot of them do it because their parents drag them to it.
Right?
You always come across that small minority of kids, either female or male, who fall in love with it so much, and all they want to do is research and learn more dances and go over and this and that, and they get so excited when they, it's something like, yes, even if it's only 10% of the kids involved, it's worth it for me. Yeah.
I can see that. We talked about this a minute ago, but how well did you know Peter and his influence?
I only knew Peter through FDF. I mean, and we got to know each other pretty well years, and his influences, well, he basically made FDF happen. I mean, it was his baby, and he had a close relationship with Bishop Anthony for many years, and who was very much in favor of FDF. And basically, FDF as an institution was Peter Preovolos' child. He was the godfather,
Right.
in a good sense, the nuno.
And you knew the boys and Litsa and
Yes, the Litsa and the boys when they were young and
Yeah.
growing up and whatnot, definitely.
it's fun.
Yeah.
Years, of
Right,
course.
or beginning years. And one thing I would like a documentary like this to do is to, there are areas in the United States, Midwest, the Northeast, where there is nothing like FDF happening. And it'd be nice for this to influence other areas. I mean, some people automatically have a gut reaction negative to competition, the idea of competition in dance, but the positive aspects of it certainly outweigh the negative aspects of it, I mean, competition, it all depends on how either your teacher or your parents especially approach it. You don't have to be cutthroat in a cutthroat mindset in a competition, You can approach it in a much more,
Teamwork for one thing.
Right. you know. But you know, again, I mean, especially among certain ethnic groups, you know, passions overrule reason.
I understand. I know the idea of competition
Yeah.
is a sore point
Yeah.
with some people.
No, and I've talked to, you know, even, you know, across the border in Canada, some performing groups here who are, oh, competition, da 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 da. And so much good has come out of FDF for the kids, for Greek dancing, for even the music. I mean, you even have young people now, not too many. I wish there were a lot more learning traditional instruments and old style music, you know, village music.